Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Untitled Reviews. This being a show, it's about dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Walker Independence. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So first and foremost, let's start off with Tom's situation in this episode, where he has an old buddy of his, Eli, show up in town because he's running from a bounty hunter that's coming after him because apparently he's continued to run the same schemes, but he doesn't have Tom to back him up. They were like partners in crime. With this whole, like the whole cattle thing, it seems like that's kind of been a long thing that Tom's been a part of, but now he's doing it probably on a much larger scale, plus he has his family's backing. So I guess it's like I wonder in Texarkana, was that a known thing? Or maybe not. Maybe it was kind of so under the radar. Eli was known about it, but maybe Tom's involvement was never known. So now they're able to shift over. But Eli felt like, hey, we could come here. I could partner up with you. We could like open up that bar in Mexico like we wanted to and stuff like that. We could keep doing our thing. But for him, he didn't realize. He thought Tom was just moving on to a new place and like, yeah, we're buddies. Of course he's going to look after me. But it's like, no, Tom has obligations to his family because everything he's doing here is bigger than him. It's for the sake of his family. Whether or not it's that his family's in a desperate situation and they have power and prestige and they're trying to hold on to it, or they're grasping for power and prestige. Either way it might be, Tom is doing this for his family, so he can't just be selfish, because I don't know whether like it's specifically his aunt's scheme or whether it's just the Davidsons as a whole, because especially if it's his aunt's thing, like his aunt means a lot to him because like once again, as we learned last episode or so, that that she's the one that got him out of the medical facility he was locked up in for a couple years. So he might be willing to do whatever she asks of him, or like I said, it just could be the whole Davidson, family's in on this whole situation, and he's playing his role, which is a cog in this giant, machine that is what the Davidsons are up to. And so Eli has to go after Eli. Tom ends up doesn't have much of a choice because the warrants have already come through. Plus they know Santiago is coming through. So Tom is doing everything he can. He probably wants to get to Eli before the others. He wants to get there before Gus. He wants to get there before Santiago, because Santiago is going to kill him just to collect the bounty. And especially when Gus is like, right, this is a criminal, he's dead or alive. It's like, yeah, he's very steadfast in his like belief about like being good. You would think after the whole Griffin thing that probably would have changed his mind, but I guess it's like, it's different when it's like, well, that was a guy that we believe killed Liam at the time, and now it's also a situation of this guy's just like, no, there's a warrant after him, dead or alive. So I think it's a little bit of a different circumstances in his mind. But you would think after the Griffin situation that would have kind of slowed his roll on that, but it's like this is a known criminal, so it's a different situation. But obviously Kim and Callian are at a little bit of an impasse because he feels like, oh, I don't have anyone to back me up. Like, yes, he's not the most trusting of the new sheriff, but also it's like Callian was like, he also makes a remark about like, right, you didn't used to come into town, like you wouldn't even step foot in town, but now all of a sudden you're coming into town all the time talking to Abby Walker, a stranger, and Hoyt, a criminal. I guess for him, it's like, right, the company you keep makes me suspicious of like what you're up to. If all of a sudden these two people are in your circle and you're being there, that's where it's like, because at first I was just thinking, I was like, but why is that such an issue? But even Callian said, like, for a long time, him and Gus could bond over the fact is they were the outsiders in town, and now Gus feels like he's on his own if you're up here buddying with people. Once again, not some Hoyt not being of an upstanding reputation. So plus I think he has his suspicions about Abby. I think that's where we're going to get to where we end up at the end of the episode, but we'll get to that soon enough. Yeah, Tom was just hoping to probably try and talk to Eli first, but get enough distance between him, Callian, and Gus, so that he could get Eli out of town, because he wants Eli to run. It's like, go to the border, whatever you need to, just get away from here. Don't mess up what I'm building here, but also I want you to survive. That might not have just been a friend. That might have been his best friend, might be one of his only friends, really. Obviously, there's still so much we don't know about Tom, but either way, sadly, Eli, being who he is, being a stubborn bastard, can't listen because he's like, I'm just gonna put Tom in a situation. It's like he mainly did what he did, leading because he was hoping to probably lead Callian and Gus off on his trail, and Tom separating himself from them long enough that it's like, okay. He's like, oh, Tom eventually find me. He's like, don't worry. All you got to do is deputize me. The problem is my deputy isn't on the take. My deputy, like, cause he's tested the waters to see what kind of person Gus is. And he's not really 100% sure. Like, I don't know if Gus found out who I really was. He wouldn't take too kindly of it. He wouldn't like me being a murderous criminal I am. Whereas Eli's like, no, I know that's who you are. We're both cut from the same cloth. So trying to do what they did before. He's like, no, just deputize me. It's like, you idiot, that's not going to work. When there's too many eyes on this situation here in Independence, I'm trying to keep it super above board. Any shady stuff I'm doing, I'm trying to do it below the board so no one notices it's me and what I'm really up to. But I've done a lot of shady stuff, but I'm trying to appear as clean cut. And if I deputize you, especially with Santiago already on his way, the warrant's already here and Gus has already seen it. Now, if he was able to get to the warrant beforehand, maybe we'd be having a different conversation, and Gus would be unaware, none the wiser. But, it's just, sadly, things turned into what they did. It turned into a situation of Santiago showing up and it's like whoa, we need to slow this roll. I did like that, two criminal peas in a pod. Speaking of that, we had, just for a little bit, Eli and Hoyt talking about their exploits and stuff like that, but it sounds like Eli would have bigger schemes. He's like, no, we all have to start somewhere, because Hoyt thought of himself as some like criminal mastermind, big shot, and it's like, obviously, like, you're small time in comparison to what the Davidsons are like, scheming, but even then, it seems like you're even small. It kind of made him go like, because he thought he was a big bad running his gang, doing his thing, like, yeah, I've run cons, I've done this and I've done that, and it's like, this guy's done more than I have, so he's hit bigger trains than I have. So I just thought that was kind of interesting. Given the opportunity, those two probably could have become friends, talking about their different criminal exploits and stuff like that. But obviously, I think he's a much hardened criminal than even like Hoyt is. But it turned into a shootout in the at Hagen's, and so it ended up being a situation where Eli's so desperate he ended up taking Abby hostage. But Tom tried to defuse the situation. He tried to find another way out of this for him. But, it's too late. Gus is already here. So is Santiago. It's like, right, you could run. But the thing is, like, he's like, if I run, Santiago's just going to find me. It's like, all right. And he's going to gut me. It's like, right, you need to help me out of this. He's like, what I can do is I can arrest you and you can get a rope. That's the only other way out of this. Like, how else do you think this is going to end at this point in time? But I can make things easier on you and give you the rope, which I'm like, the rope ain't easy. Like, that's still a brutal way to die. It's still a horrific way to die. Unless you're a big guy like me, like that, because the lighter you are, the longer it's going to take for your neck to snap. So you could be just dangling there, like, if you're lucky, and it is, the lucky thing is the moment you hang, your neck snaps immediately. Otherwise, you're going to be strangled and you're going to be flailing for a hot minute. So that, so it's not good either way, but there's no other way out of this. He wants Tom to put him down, but Tom's like, no, I'm not about to do that. You're my friend. I'm not going to do that. And he forces Tom's hand. And you can see it in Abby's eyes, and she talks about it later. At one point, she was almost seeing like, for one, I think she likes seeing him in pain because it's kind of like, yeah, you deserve it, you bastard, for what you've done. But also it's like, wow, I can't believe you being the murderous piece of shit that you are, that there's obviously people who matter enough to you. This is someone that's not even a Davidson. This ain't family, but this is someone you loved and cared about, that now that he's gone, it hurts you. Like, seeing him break down in tears, obviously it's the same way Abby felt and she recognizes that hurt. So she even tells Kate later on, it's like, I saw him for being the man that a killer we know him to be, but I also saw him scared and hurt, like he's someone, like he lost something he loved in that moment, so that's what I thought was so fascinating, like seeing that side of Tom, because we haven't seen that. He's been so like dark and mischievous and scheming and evil and being a killer, that when we see him vulnerable like this, you almost go like, man, I almost feel bad for you. And then I remember you're a garbage human being. So it's like, no sympathy for you, you know? So, and I think like Abby was having all those rush of emotion. I mean, not for a second did she go like, oh man, I feel bad. It's like, no, you killed my husband. Fuck you. But I think it's still that thing. I'm like, wow, seeing you like this, you out of anyone, you know, cause she probably think of him completely as a hardened killer. Even as a killer, he is a human. Humans have complexity. You can't just be like, you know, you could easily dispatch of people that are just standing in your way versus, hey, this is someone I care about. I had to accidentally kill because it was kind of suicide by cop type of situation, you know? So wouldn't even give Eli's body over to Santiago because it's like, no, you're not going to get the prize. I'm going to give my friend, I think, a decent, proper burial. I'm not going to let you, like, probably, because who knows how that situation, because I mean, considering the times and everything like that, it might be that thing of, like, because don't they, like, position your bodies and stuff like that in the coffin out in the open so people can see you? Like, they kind of make a statement, a point. Like, so I think that would have been kind of, I don't know how they handle, like, dead bodies of criminals like that. I think that's the thing in the Old West, but, you know, maybe that's just from, Western stuff. I'm kind of conflating that with, like, you know, movies or TV shows I've seen that's kind of touched on that. Maybe that's not kind of like a real thing that happened at the time, or maybe it was, I don't know. But since we're on that topic, let's jump ahead a little bit and talk about the end of the episode and kind of circle back to some other story elements later. But at the end, Callian is talking to Gus about like, hey, like the fact is you got to know that something's up with Tom. He's like, yes, I've known that there's something up with Tom, but I know he was hiding something just like I know you've been hiding something. So what is it? It's like, all right. The fact of the matter is you can't tell me the sheriff doesn't seem suspicious. It's like, plus, he killed a previous sheriff, Liam Collins, and he was like, why didn't you come to me sooner? But he was like, I don't think Tom's the one that did it. I'm like, why don't you think so? And immediately in my brain, I'm like, don't tell me you're going to start going down the Abbey wall. Because it's like, right, here's this woman who came out of nowhere type of thing. I don't know if he's thinking that, or whether he legitimately is like, no, it couldn't have been Tom. Because that's what I was thinking, like, for myself. I was like, did he for a second actually not kill... because once again, I thought that like maybe episode 2, I was thinking for a second, like, wait, could it be he actually didn't kill? But it's like, no, it must be that Gus has other suspects. He must be suspecting it's either Abby or Hoyt. I'm leaning more Abby, but because like he seems the most suspicious of Abby, so he probably thinks, in fact, he might be thinking Abby and Hoyt together killed the sheriff or something, like they're a criminal like thing they got going on. So. Because Callian hasn't told him everything, like, right, Abby's actually Liam's wife. And even then, that might make her even more of a suspect, too. So, I don't know if the whole, like, oh, the spouse is the most likely suspect is a thing at this point in time. Obviously, in more modern policing, like, you know, the statistics kind of might lean more toward it being a significant other. You watch enough, like, live action like crime, true crime stuff like my mom does because she stays on that ID channel. Then you would be like, man, was because so many of those cases are, yeah, it's like a boyfriend or girlfriend or husband or wife, and you're like, that it feels like every time you turn around, it's specifically one of those. So like the statistics seem like in general that might lean that way. I don't know. We'll ultimately have to wait and see who his suspects are, but I feel like Abby's number 1, but my number 2 would more so be like Abby and Hoyt. 3 would be Hoyt, but we'll see where Gus aligns himself next episode on like revealing like his side of things, why he's got the perspective he's got, and who's his suspect is. So we got that. And another side of the episode, talking about Hoyt as a criminal, I love that Kate and Abby are like laughing at him because he's like, because he points out like, how is it that I'm the only one of us who isn't working for Tom? It's like, he's your boss here at Hagen's, you work for him as, you know, at the sheriff's office. Callian's now his tracker, like that he could get called upon at any point in time. It's like, I'm the only one that has a job with him, But so that means I could sneak in and break into his office, but the others are laughing at it. It's like, oh, you are not subtle at all. So they decide to break in, and obviously he follows suit. And I love that he's like, oh, you got to find stuff that's hidden. He's probably hidden in like a criminal. So he's like scooting across the floor trying to find like the loose floorboard, which I'm like, hey, you watch enough, that would be the cliche of like, well, it's got to be in a hidden floorboard, but it's probably like, maybe Tom thinks that's such an idiotic thing to do. That's an idiot criminal thing to do. I'm at least a little smarter than your average criminal, so like I wouldn't do something stupid like that. So I love that because he's trying to prove his usefulness. Like, yeah, I know. He's like, yeah, I was thinking about checking the books immediately afterwards. And they suggest something. He was like, yeah, I was thinking that exact same thing. And I love like Kate like pops him on the head afterwards because they end up finding out that the reason why Tom's able to do what he's been doing is like, for example, the store that he was trying to buy up in town, the two sisters are running, or specifically their land. It was going to be through like what is essentially, I think, a shell corporation back then. It's a company is why they're doing all this, so their names aren't directly attached. Ergo, shell company. So that's how they were probably able to. That's how they were able to get around some of the shady dealings that they're doing. So, but what I also like too is that this kind of puts Kate and Abby a little at odds for a bit throughout the episode because Kate. So I guess she's not like because the Pinkertons are official like police like secret, they're special securities while also being like police. So I thought Kate was like more like a police officer or detective, but she's more so like an investigator. Well, I mean, which I think I still label, but I still in my head I treated her more like an officer. Like the Pinkertons are the real like they're more so the police like people, but she's the one they kind of send out to investigate. She's once again, she can disguise herself and hide. I think a lot of what I said previously, like, yeah, people won't kind of give her too. I mean, yes, but she presenting herself as the way she is, like they're just gonna be like, oh, she's a dancer at Hagen's. They won't think too much of it. Would never cross their mind that she's an investigator. She has that benefit. Once again, I think also just being a woman in general, they probably won't think like, oh, like a woman has that job. Especially at this point in time, they probably wouldn't think that. So I think a lot of what I said before previously, but I think it just like what her job position actually was. I was thinking more like she was an actual like full like police investigator, but it's kind of I think she's kind of like got like she kind of has to report to like some of the more police level people about her investigation. So she kind of has to pass it up the chain like any other situation. So I think that's kind of more accurate to what her position is as an investigator. Either way, she's asking all the hard questions to Abby about like, right, the fact is you or Tom and because it's like, right, did you know about the Davidsons? Did Liam know about the Davidsons? Did he have enemies? She's asking all these questions, and Abby's getting frustrated because it's like, how dare you talk about my husband? Like, you didn't really know him. But that's the problem, because even Abby didn't know him. And I think what really cuts her deep is that even she started questioning Liam, because she never did. She never was like, why are we leaving here? Like, she's like, I don't know if, like, things were bad in it. Because I think they touched on a little bit, like, there was some corruption back in Boston, but that's about it. Like, they never really expounded upon that. And she even remembers the last thing that she said to Liam. It's like, are you hiding something from me? And he was like, right, how much I love you is the only secret I'm keeping. But now it's like, right. Because admitting like she didn't know Liam as well as she did because he was the love of her life. If her father didn't approve, which we still don't know we know part of the beef had to be about her and Liam's relationship, but beyond that, we don't know what else. We've touched on it a little bit about Abby and her sister, like why that they had a fallout, but in general, why she strayed so far from her family. Maybe it's simply about the Liam thing. Maybe there's other extenuating circumstances, but it is a situation of like, this is the man that you love and you don't want to question him. You don't want to think the worst of them. But now it is a thing of maybe I didn't know him as well as I did. Because if I start questioning aspects about him, then it's going to make me question, us. But also it's just going to be like, right, like she doesn't want to like have to think of the person that she loved who is now gone. She doesn't want to have to think of him in the way of like, maybe I didn't know as much as I should. And it did get her thinking, and she tells Kate that she was right. Like, right, I might not have known my husband as well as I thought I did, but whatever the truth may be, I'm ready to face it, whatever ends up happening. Because ultimately, you know, especially for Abby in this episode, because she ended up buying Kate enough time to get away from Eli during that hostage situation. And it's like, yeah, I did it because I knew you would do the same for me. And I think that speaks a lot about, and maybe this ends up being a little bit of that Walker self-sacrifice type of situation, where it's like the Walkers have a tendency to jump into the deep end. We see that with Cordell, and it seems like his ancestor was no different. She has a little bit of that, like she's ready to jump into the fire. I mean, it takes a lot of bravery and willingness to jump into the deep end to do what she's doing, trying to get justice for her husband, getting so close to the man who murdered him, stepping deep, deep, deep into the lion's den, so. But it's definitely going to be interesting to ultimately see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.